In this Blender tutorial, I'll show you how I made low-poly game assets, specifically an axe, medical pack, and ammo box in Blender. The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. I've provided some references if you want to follow along. After I open the axe reference image, I use the default cube to begin making the handle. I'll be using a combination of loop cuts and extrusions to model the handle. In object mode, I add a bevel modifier and shave the handle smooth. I now add a cylinder and begin making the blade through a series of loop cuts and extrusions. In object mode, I add a bevel modifier and shade the blade smooth. I select both objects and apply the rotation and scale. I provided a link to the site where I downloaded my materials in the description. I split the viewport and opened the UV editor. I select both objects and tab into edit mode. I need to unwrap the objects so I can apply texture maps to them. In this case, I'll use the Smart UV option. I then export the UV. I change to the shader editor and select the handle. I'll be using the Node Wrangler add-on. Using Ctrl-Shift-T, I open my wood texture and make adjustments needed to the UV. I repeat this process for the blade. If I want the front of the blade to be a different color, I select the faces and apply new material to them. I set up the metal material and add a color ramp between the albedo or color texture and the BSDF shader. I change the interpolation to constant and give the faces a color. I bring in the medical pack reference. I'll be using a cube to make the medical pack, using bevels, loop cuts, and extrusions to form the container. I'll first mark the location of the handle, and then add bevels to the medical pack. I add a vertical edge loop and a small bevel and scale in the faces to make it look like there's a seam for the pack to open. I then form the handle using insets, bridging edge loops and bevels. I use a subdivided plane to make the cross for the pack. In object mode, I apply the rotation and scale. I split the viewport and open the UV editor. I unwrap the object using the Smart UV option and export the UV. I change to the shader editor and add a new material. Using Ctrl-Shift-T, I open the plastic texture. Since I want the kit to be red, I add a color ramp between the albedo or color texture and the BSDF shader. I change the interpolation to constant and give the faces a color. I want the cross to remain white, so I add a second material and add the textures for the plastic. I bring in the ammo box reference, I'll be using a cube to make the box. Using loop cuts and extrusions to form the box. I add more cubes for the lock. I use edge loops to mark where the lid is separated. scaling the faces inward along their normals. In object mode, I add a bevel modifier, add smooth shading, and apply the rotation and scale. I split the viewport and open the UV editor. I will use the Smart UV Project option for unwrapping and export the UV. I change the shader editor and add a new material. Using Ctrl-Shift-T to open the wood texture and make any adjustments needed to the scale. I add a new material for the buttons and apply the metal texture. I want to add a decal to the box, so I import the reference image via Images as Planes. I reopen the UV editor and open the image I just imported and move it to the top of the box. Under the Texture tab in the Settings panel, I turn off Shadow mode since I don't want the decal to cast any shadows. In Edit mode, I scale the UV so it only covers the ammo at the top. Scaling it in the viewport. I then add a shrink wrap modifier with the ammo box as the target and give it a small offset. I then duplicate the decal and place them along the top of the ammo box. If you have a request for a tutorial, a question, or a comment, feel free to leave a comment below the video. If you're interested in learning more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.